Welcome to a new video in my home automation series, and I'm back on this solar panel dashboard in Grafana. And today I want to talk about a single panel, which is this balance. And in here I'm just going to continue on the theme of well, what we've discussed before is how I included my house consumption into the solar generation graph. And I also wanted to add some functionality so I can monitor how much, what is my balance in terms of how much electricity I use and generate, because I am in the lucky position that I still have a plan where I am on a yearly meter reading cycle, which means that my meters are getting I do a meter reading in the beginning of the year, and I don't provide a meter reading throughout the entire year, and also I don't get an invoice for the whole year. And the reason I'm doing that, because in this way the excess energy that I generate during the summer is I can use it in the winter. So basically at the end of the year, the utility company is going to say that, okay, this is how much I generated, this is how much I used, as in kilowatt hours, and this is how much I generated, and they just subtract the two, and I have to pay the difference, which means that I can use the grid as a buffer, as basically a battery. And I mean, I understand this is not really something that is available in a lot of countries, because especially in countries where there is a lot of solar panels, that definitely costs money. So the utility companies usually move their customers into like a monthly tariff or a daily tariff, which means that your excess generation is getting paid on, with some money, and then whatever you use is of course you are getting paid for that. But of course what you generate is usually paid on a lower tariff than what you used. So so far it is good, and I'm really happy, because especially with the new panels, I think I'm going to generate more on a yearly basis. I'm going to generate more electricity than I use in a yearly basis. So and until it's available, I'm definitely going to use it. So I'm just going to use the grid as a storage. So for that, I wanted to have a balance on my screen, which is basically going to tell me what is my current balance. So I have a meter reading, or I had a meter reading on the 8th of January, because 8th of every month is like my billing cycle. So I had a meter reading on the 8th, and I also I don't have to do a meter reading every month, but I still put the meter reading on papers, and I also put this into Influx DB, and Grafana is going to calculate how much what is my balance since my the beginning of the year meeting, or basically the billing relevant reading. So it looks like that since the beginning of since the 8th of January, I have used 281 kilowatt hours of energy, which I think it is a really good number, which means that even in these 2 months, which is basically January and February, I had a considerable amount of generation. So I think normally I use 400 kilowatts per month, and now in the 2 months I only use 300, which means that in 2 months I should have used 800, but I only have 300, so the other 500 must have been the generation or the solar output, which is pretty good, because it's definitely going to be net positive once we get into summer period, when it's going to be a lot more than what I generate today. So today was, again, really nice weather. It's cold, so the panels are cool. I've generated 26 kilowatt hours, and if I say that I use 400 kilowatt hours per month, which means that I use 13-14 a day, and even today I generated 26. I might need to consider how I can use more electricity throughout the year. So one suggestion was that I throw out the gas boiler and I replace it with an electric boiler, so for heating. So I don't know, maybe I should do that in the summer. So let's see how it's done. So for first, I think I'm just going to go to InfluxDB, and I show you how I store the data. I mean, of course, this is all manual meter reading, so it has nothing to do with the energy monitoring that I showed you in the past. I just basically have a simple form in Node-RED which feeds the data into InfluxDB. So I created a new measurement which is called the meter readings, and at the moment I have a tag which is a type. So I do gas, which I'm not going to use at the moment, but since I do the meter reading at the same time, I might as well just record it in InfluxDB. But what I really care about is the electricity. And I have 3 meter readings. So I have a peak and an off-peak meter, and the peak meter has 2 readings. One is how much I've used and how much I generated. So I have these 3 meter readings. And yeah, and I have one more tag which is billing, which is basically billing relevant. So this is where I say that the January reading was billing relevant, so that was yes. So if I switch, if I do a custom period, you can see that I have 2 possible tag values, the yes or no. So my January reading was a billing relevant reading, and then let's say my February and my March reading was non-billing relevant. So what I can do is I can look at my last reading, and then I can subtract from that. I can subtract the last billing relevant reading. So I know that since the last billing, whether I am in positive or negative, and that's the idea. And yeah, I mean, sorry, let me just change to this view. So you can see that, I just have one billing relevant reading that was on the, what was it? Yeah, on the 8th of January, as I said, and these were my meter readings. And if I select the non-billing relevant, then actually I didn't record my February reading. So this is the one that I recorded 2 days ago. So 8th of March. And that's the reading that I had just 2 days ago. Okay, so let's see how it looks like in the Node-RED. I built a very simple UI, so this is something that I'm going to use once a month. So it's not really, it's very simple. So I can select the time and a date, and I can also select a time. I don't think that it's much relevant or not, but anyway, I thought that I'm going to use both of them, and I also have a slider to say, is this billing relevant or not billing relevant? And I can here set, my gas meter is, let's say, 17,000, and it also shows me the data which is going to get generated. So measurement meter reading, the tags is gas and billing yes, and the fields are the gas 1700 and the timestamp, because up until now, whenever I was creating a line protocol, I didn't include the timestamp. So it obviously gets the current date and time. But if you pass a timestamp, then, well, InfluxDB is going to use that timestamp. So I either modify the gas value and I click on Save Gas Meter Reading, or I can modify my free readings for the electricity. So off-peak, the 1.8.0 is the one that is used from the grid. So that counter increases whenever I'm using I'm using energy from the grid, and 2.8.0 is when I'm generating more energy. So basically the power goes out from the house to the grid. So you can enter these free readings, and then the data basically changes to the electricity and the free readings and also the timestamp. So you either modify this and press this button, or you modify this, or basically it's free and you press this button. And the Node-RED flow is it's not very complicated, but I had to play around with it because this was the first time I was creating stuff in with a timestamp, and I think it does matter how you send in a timestamp, because it's not the usual Unix timestamp. Because I think the Unix timestamp or the JavaScript timestamp is milliseconds, but actually by default when you create a send data in to InfluxDB, it's in nanoseconds. So let me show you the flow, which is that much. So I have all the UI elements, and all these UI elements have different topics. So you can see it has a topic of off-peak or some other topics, and then it goes into a central function node, which basically just saves all the value into the context. So it checks what the topic was, so it knows where to store the value. And whenever I get either the gas or one of the electricity reading, then it automatically generates the data for it. And as you can see, I'm using the date and the time, and I had to times it by 1 million. So it gets into the same format what InfluxDB expects in milliseconds. And I also have this thing here, which must be that's basically a time zone correction. So this is -1 hour. And to be honest, I never really understand why I need this, because my understanding was that whenever you send data in, you are sending it in local time zone. And in JavaScript, when you create, when you have a date, that it also uses the local time zone, but it is 1 hour off. So I'm 1 hour behind UTC. So this is why I had to extract 1 hour. So if you are in a different time zone, probably you have to extract different amount of hours. So if you want to extract 2 hours or 6 hours, then you have to multiply it by 6. But anyway, so I was playing around with it. I was sending the data. I was checking in the InfluxDB what's the exact timestamp. So there was just a fine tuning to do that. And and whenever you press the button, then it just sends out the data. Also, this data in the object itself is getting stored in the context. So then it just sends the data out, and it shows just a toast message on the screen that the data is saved, and then the information goes to a InfluxDB batch input node. I'm using batch input for anything, even though I'm only creating one set of data. So this goes into my Node-RED bucket with Influx, Influx batch. And this is how the data gets created. Okay, so that's simple. And now we can go into the panel, and we can see how I generated the data. I mean, of course, the most interesting thing about this is how I have created the Flux query, because nothing is really done in Grafana, it's all in Flux. And as you can see, it's quite a lot. So let me just copy this into Notepad so you can see the whole thing. So what I've done here is I created 2 queries. So first I select the last build reading, which goes into a variable called build, and then I select the last reading, which is not the billing relevant, but yeah, that's the last reading. And then I join the 2 tables using the join command, which again is something that I use for the first time, and I just do a mapping where I do the calculation between the 2. So let me show you how these selections are done. So if I go to script editor and I just remove this, then you can see that this is how I select the data. So I go back to 2 years, I think, yeah, I could go back just 1 year. So I select the measurement, meter readings, the type electricity, and the billing yes. So I want the last billing relevant reading. And of course, if next year I just create another billing relevant reading, then it would just pick up the last one because of this last year. And I also pre-select some of the fields that I need. So I have off-peak, peak generated, and peak used. So these are the 3 readings for electricity. And if I use this, let me just show you how it looks like in the table view. Then I have table stream of 3 tables because obviously the fields are different. So now, because I would need to use these fields in a calculation and I want them in a single table with all these values as simple columns, then we go back to our old friend, the pivot, and I just do a very simple pivot. The key is the time, the columns are the fields, and the values are the values. So that basically transforms the table stream into a single table where I have the peak generated, the peak used, and the off-peak as columns. And I also have some other fields. And then finally, I just drop some of the fields that I don't need. So I have a more simple table. So it has a time, the type is electricity, and then off-peak, peak used, and peak generated. So that's fine. And then I also need to find the last reading, which is the same as this one. So it's always going to be use the function last, but then I look for the billing, which is not, sorry, the, what is it, tag where the billing says no. So as you can see, as I said, my billing anniversary or the year anniversary is on January the 8th. So, and if I look at the last reading, that was in March. So you can see it's the March the 8th. Good. And just like before, you can put this into variables, and then you can use them. For example, I think previously I used the union when I joined 2 tables, and if you use the union, then it basically puts the row from one of the table under the so you have union, then you have the records in each of the table would go under each other. But then if you do join, you can do something else. And this is a very interesting thing because actually if I show you, I think it's going to make sense. So as you can see here, both of these queries are returning the same structure. So it has time, type, off-peak, peak generated, and peak used. So now if I do this whole, the 2 tables and the join, then this is what happens. So what I said is in the join, you have to say how the records are going to be joined together. And normally you would join records by time. So then the records in the 2 tables or the multiple tables with the same time would get joined together. But here I have meter reading. I want to basically join readings from different times. So I couldn't use the underscore time as the joining condition, which is here is on and the time. So normally it would be on colon and the field would be underscore time. But for me, I use the type because for both of them is electricity. And of course, because here I'm using the last, I can ensure that in each tables, I just have one entry. Because otherwise, if I would have multiple entries, I don't think it would be possible to join them because you have multiple cases where the type matches. But here it was only one. And so I want to join the table build, and for those fields that are in the build table, I want to use the prefix, well actually the postfix build, and for the current table I want to use the postfix current. So as you can see, what the join does, it creates this new table where it has the field that you use for the joining condition. And then for all the fields in the table get replicated in this new table, but they would always have the corresponding key or this postfix. So we have the underscore time underscore build, which is the underscore time from the build field. So that's the 8th of January. And the time from the current table was the 8th of March. So now you can see what was the build off peak, the current off peak, and the peak generated build, and the peak generated current, and the other as well. So, and now because I have it in a single record, I can just simply use a map function where I mean, you can read the calculation here, but basically what I do is I calculate the difference between the peak, the current off peak minus the build off peak, and I use the same for the used peak current minus the build. That's going to give me all the electricity that I used, and from that I extract what I have generated. Again, current minus build, and that's going to give me the total. And I just used a different sign because what I wanted is I wanted a negative number if I'm using more that I have generated, and I wanted a positive number if I generate more than what I have used. So this is how I come up with a number, which is just on the dashboard. So I created a simple stat widget panel, and it has a title of balance. And here I specify that, I mean, still, you know, this query is going to return all these fields, but here I'm only interested in the balance. So here you can specify that you only want not all the fields or all the numeric fields, but you specifically want the balance. So now it shows that it's minus 281 kilowatt hours. And of course, in the units, where is the unit? I specified that it is kilowatt hours. So this is, yeah, kilowatt hour. So this is why it says kilowatt hour. And that's it. So hopefully when I do my meter reading next month, then I just go to my meters and I put the readings on a paper, and I come to Node-RED. I'm going to enter them here, and then I can refresh this stat. And because of the, you know, the last function here on the build, not the build, the current, it will pick up that reading, and of course the build is still going to be the same, and it's just going to calculate me my new balance, and that's going to be great. And I have some ideas how I can enhance this one, because what I can do, I mean, you know, I'm always getting billed based on what my meter reading says versus what my energy meter, for example, my Shelly says. So this is why I wanted to use my exact meter readings as the basis of this calculation. But I'm thinking what I can do is so in my case, this calculation is or this balance is up to date until my last meter reading, which was 2 days ago on 8th of March. So what I can do is I can check what my Shelly is telling me what the total was on the 8th of March. And again, I can get what the total is at the moment. And if I subtract the two, then Shelly would be able to tell me sort of like approximately or unofficially how much I have used since my last meter reading. So in theory, I should be able to get an up-to-date balance as well, which I think is going to be interesting. But knowing how difficult it is, knowing how difficult it was to get to this stage, I think building a query which can incorporate the Shelly is going to be really, really difficult. But I definitely want to do that. And I mean, by the way, even to get to this stage, I had to get the help from the Grafana community. So I created a new topic on the Grafana forum, and I expected the response to be like in a couple of weeks, but actually I think I asked this question yesterday, and we had a few discussions with one of the guys, and I was able to get to this query that I just showed you and talked about. So it was really good. So I'm hoping that I can use this sort of this join and a maps with this additional scenario where I'm going to select more data for this query, and hopefully I can join that one as well and do some additional calculation to give me some, you know, live balance figures, which would be, yeah, really interesting. So if I manage to do that, I would definitely create a new video, but I think that would be all for today. If you are interested in this, well, basically this panel, I think I can export this panel into JSON, and of course I can also export the Node-RED flow in JSON. So I'm just going to put the links for these in the video description. So again, that was all for today. Thanks for watching and hopefully see you in the next video.